is the third Sunday in June, and according to the law enacted by President Nixon, that means we get to honor fathers. For those of you who aren't aware, Father's Day was the result of a young woman in Spokane, Washington, attending Mass on Mother's Day and going, look, my mom died when I was born and my dad raised 6 kids. I think he deserves a day. And so she managed to talk it up in Spokane and in 1909. And then Calvin Coolidge got word of it because, well, the senator from Washington and all of that. And so Calvin Coolidge encouraged it, and then, by the time we got to Nixon, it actually was made into law. So we have an official federal holiday honoring the fathers of our land, which is very interesting because there's almost nothing out there on the literature. Even in the UU literature, there's almost nothing about Father's Day. You can get tons and tons of material on Mother's Day. It's a little scary, actually. When I was growing up, there was no man in the household. My mother and father were divorced when I was an infant, and he didn't show up until a few months after I had an interesting experience. In the fall of the year I was 12, I realized that there were many men in my life. I didn't have a dad, but I had Cousin Harold, and I had Uncle Howard, and I had, neighbor down the way, and so on. And each one of them gave me something, right? Another aspect of the male presence in my life. And then there was this beingness that was talked about in church that was this divine thing called Father. And so I connected with that in the wee hours of the night when I was a little afraid, and used that as my composite father presence. But you can understand that the third Sunday in June was meaningless to me until I was required, after he showed up when I was 13, to honor him on a day that he had no involvement in. It was this weirdness, right? None of you have any weirdness around Father's Day. And that's one of the reasons I think that there is so little supportive literature around this day. We really don't quite know what to make of it. I remember there's a song out there. The group is a duo called Devotion, and they sing, we are the ones we've been waiting for, right? And the second line in there is, we are the fathers, blessed with a gentle strength. Isn't that lovely? Blessed with a gentle strength. And so I was able to find a few things online that I thought we would enjoy looking at. And Billy Graham names it. He absolutely names it. When he tells us, we don't talk enough about the role of fathers in our world. We just don't talk about it. It's kind of like fish in the ocean, right? The importance of the father. When I was driving across Texas last week, one of the talk shows that I was listening to was a psychologist on a Christian radio station talking about the father wound. And we're going to look at that a little bit, but the absence of the father leaves a wound. But the presence of the father means this, again, you have this mixed bag. We've got the support, and yet we've got the one holding the boundaries. This thus far and no further, right? And we've got the looking up to, and yet, sometimes there's some stumbling there. And so it really is a complex relationship with the father presence. And the important thing to remember is, as I learned growing up, it's got nothing to do with the biology. And as Riley pointed out, it's got nothing to do with the biology, right? It's got to do with the willingness to show up and provide loving attention. And it's got to do with this. The people who believe in the potential that we carry, who don't get distracted by the times we don't live up to it, and keep holding, this is who I know you to be, this is what I know you can accomplish. It makes a huge difference, doesn't it? And the other piece of it is part of why it's a complex thing in our world, I think, is because there's a lot of talk in the feminine mind, but there's not a whole lot of talk in the masculine mind. I'm reminded of a movie, The River Runs Through It. The father is a Presbyterian minister, and his wife is president, and they have a pleasant home, but he's got 2 boys. Now, the father's first love is fly fishing. He may be a minister, but really it's about fly fishing. So he's basically homeschooling the boys. And they spend the morning doing whatever the assignment is. But the moment that assignment is done, everybody heads for the river. And it's just a beautiful illustration of the blending of qualities in a fully present father, and also the illustration of the tendency to rebel against it. For girls, it's a little different. And I love this line. It isn't to teach his daughter how to be a lady, it's to teach her how a lady should be treated. Right? Isn't that marvelous? And as I became aware of that, I realized that was the piece that was totally missing in my growing up. Never had that experience of, as a child, an adult male treating me as a precious female. Never had that. So that was a very useful insight for me, and I'm sure it may be useful for some of you. Wouldn't it be nice if every human being could live up to the standards that we hold for a father, right? Makes memories, goes on great adventures, always puts his family first. No, but tries, right? Makes sacrifices, is patient, always has time, so he can, again, not necessarily, but aims for that, right? Aims for that. And that final thing, love the kids and their mother. There's a number of things out there that say that one of the most important things a father can do is demonstrate his love for his wife, the kid's mother. Because then the kids get to see what a loving adult looks like, and they get to show up that way. We're living in a culture right now that has so downplayed the role of father and the role of these behaviors in the development of the child that we have adults who have not experienced any of this or very little of this in their growing up. And so they're not giving it to the kids and the people around them in the way that the culture requires. It's a little scary. And there's always a turnaround point. Okay. So for the son, as we saw earlier, the dad is a hero. He is everything he wants to be. And if the dad pays attention, the dad might possibly choose to be what his son thinks he is. Right? Yeah. And what's amazing is that, again, although the culture doesn't necessarily support that, there are always pockets of support. So once we make the decision to become something that we haven't experienced ourselves in the past, the support begins to show up. Right? A lot of you are in this room for just that reason. The support has showed up for whatever it is that you have made the decision to become. I love that. So trusting that is beautiful. Well, in the rebellion process, part of adolescence is an interesting process because the boy has had this hero, right, who knows everything, and then when he starts to be an adolescent, the hero suddenly doesn't seem to know anything. Right? Mark Twain is such a character, a delightful character. And it really is amazing as we mature how we begin to see how our parents actually do have some wisdom and knowledge. which as teens we could not allow ourselves to see, right? And so part of this whole process of relating to fathers is making that shift from being totally dependent to being worshiping the hero, to being, no way, I don't have anything to do with that, to, oh my goodness, look at that. There is a gift here in my life who happens to be the man who is my father. Or in my case, the half a dozen men who filled that role, right? Amazing, astonishing how much they learn in that time. I did find an anagram for father. The friend, the anchor, the teacher, the hero, the constant source of encouragement, and a role model. Yeah. Which brings us to the father wound. You don't have any one of those things missing, and there is a wound. And again, we live in a culture that doesn't honor that, recognize that, and so we're going through life with this wound. Now, sometimes, as Jeff pointed out, there is a therapist who is able to help us see that and address that and turn around through that. So the therapist is an important part of the process. I commented on Mother's Day about my friend who did the best with her kids and announced one day, I'm doing the best I can, and when they're growing up, they'll go to the therapist and clean up the rest. That's the culture we live in. The therapist is an important part of the village anymore. But really, we need to recognize that these elements need to be present in our lives, and if they haven't been as we're growing up, we must address them as adults. And many times the thing that is our stumbling block most often as an adult is the piece that was missing in our fathering as we were growing up. So something to be aware of if there are stumbling blocks in your life. Go back and take a look. Were these things present? And if they weren't, what can be done to fill that hole? Because it can be at any point in life. Ooh, wow. Sorry about that coloring. It says, it's by Gloria Vanderbilt, and it says, if you've never had a mother or a father, you grow up seeking something you're never going to find, ever. You seek it in love and in people and in beauty. So if you grow up with one piece of the puzzle missing, you're always looking, not knowing where that the hole, the wound, is that missing piece. You're looking in everything you can find. And there is a degree to which looking in religion becomes the apparent solution. Many people, including myself, lacking pieces of the puzzle of mothering and or fathering, have gone into the spiritual life to fill those in. And it's very effective. In fact, ultimately, it is the only answer, because that spirituality, that awareness of something greater that is always present and always encouraging and always supportive and always nurturing and always protective, that awareness then does allow that wound to be healed. Whatever we call it. Whatever we call it. In the Christian tradition, there was a turning point. No religion on earth calls the infinite, all that is, source of everything, Father, except Christianity. Isn't that interesting? There is, in the indigenous earth-centered tradition, there is the mother, the planet, that provides everything. And then Father is usually represented as sky, and the rain is seen as seminal fluid. The rain seeds the earth and allows things to grow. Sometimes the Father is seen as sun, but usually the sun is an all-encompassing, and not even entity, energy, right? And the entities are assigned to the sky and the earth. the idea that the all-encompassing source and nurturer of all is a father is introduced in this prayer. This is the Aramaic version of the prayer that shows up in the book of Matthew that is called in the Christian tradition the Lord's Prayer. And that first word, Abun. Jesus often called that power that he felt in and around and through the world, Abba, Daddy. This is the plural of it in Aramaic, Abun, which in the Greek and then the Latin and then into the English became our Father. Dewash Maya. So Abun, O beloved nurturer, source of the cosmos, that's the one of the many, many interpretations of that Aramaic word, Abun. How many of you are comfortable with Aramaic in the room? Comfortable as in you interpret Aramaic into English? Okay, good. But you're okay with my using it? All right. And I know Marcia did a whole lot with it, so I won't spend a lot of time with it. But that word, and it is Abun. You can't say it another way. You know, Aramaic is like Chinese in that way. If you don't have the tone right, you haven't used that word. Okay? Abun. Presence of the source of all who is nurturing and supporting and protecting us all the time. That's what that word is trying to say. You create all that moves in light. That Maya. And anyone who's familiar with Sanskrit, Maya. Right? Maya. Ma is the light. Maha is a great. And that great. All right. And then we got that Ma in the second word in Net Kadash Maha. Focus your light within us. Focus your light within us. Now there's two versions of this. There's many versions of this because Aramaic is one of those languages where any word might have 5 or 6 different meanings depending on the context, depending on the order, depending on da-da-da-da-da. So as you go through, if you look online with the Aramaic Lord's Prayer, which is usually the easiest way to get copies of it and versions of it, you'll find half a dozen different translations. This is taken from a book by Lord George Lamsa, who was an Orthodox Christian who lived in the Middle East, grew up speaking Aramaic, realized that much of what had been translated into English had been translated from the Greek into English, and wondered what happened to the original Aramaic, because of course Jesus taught in Aramaic, because that's what everyone spoke. Any of you who saw Mel Gibson's The Passion got to hear a lot of Aramaic. And so, all of that is happening, and he finally said, look, there's got to be some original sources in Aramaic. So he went around the Middle East, and he found a few copies of parchments that were only like 4 or 5 copies from the original, right? And one of those was in Mosul, so I'm constantly praying for Mosul, that it didn't get destroyed and all the terrible things that are happening there. But he was able to find Aramaic language for what we are getting through 3 or 4 languages. And he wrote a version of the Gospels in English as a direct translation. It's worth looking at, George Lamsa. Tete Malkutak, create your reign of unity now through our light-filled hearts and willing hands. Very different experience. It goes on more about the light, more about how the desire, the will of God, the infinite, all that is, acts with ours, as in all light, in all forms. So when Jesus introduced the concept of the infinite all that is the source of all, and encouraging and supporting and nurturing all as a father presence, it literally turned religion around in the world. And it was part of what made it become the essence of the Roman Empire under Constantine in 325 AD. He knew that he could no longer have the emperor be the father of the empire. And so he invited the Christian bishops to come in and create a new empire base, religious empire base. And we're still living out the end of that Roman Empire period. And it is the end of that Roman Empire period. It's ending. It's ending as we stand here. So the presence of a spiritual father has shifted and changed a lot of things. And I think it's fascinating. Since the 70s and the rise of the women's movement, there's been a lot of talk about how we live in this patriarchal culture, and yet we don't talk about fathers. Right? And we attend these patriarchal churches, quote unquote, and yet we don't really talk about how that spiritual father fills the void when the physical father isn't able to for whatever reason. What I want to suggest is that the father consciousness is present not only in the spirit and in the masculine body, but is present in every human being. I'm going back to Carl Jung here, who says the animus and the anima, the female soul, the feminine mind, and the masculine mind are present in all of us, yes. And that as we mature, we integrate them. And as we go through life, we begin to experience more and more aspects of both the mothering and the fathering. So I'd like to do a small exercise with you if you'd like. Are you willing? Thank you. All right. So for anyone who has helped deliver a baby, would you please come forward? Human would be preferable, but animal works. All right. So there is a woman there who is going through the hardest work of her life. Anyone who's had a baby understands this. And if she hasn't been properly trained, it hurts beyond anything she has ever experienced and ever will again. Oh my goodness. And yet these people stood there and did whatever it took to facilitate that birthing process. And I want to thank them. So thanks for your fatherly support. Thank you, and thank you. Now, has anyone in the room ever picked up a newborn infant and fallen in love? You willing to come forward? Made a commitment in that love. I am so in love with this child, I will be there for it. Thank you. Thank you for your fatherly support. I don't know. Thank you for your fatherly support, truly. Thank you. And thank you. There's room over here. You can come over here. All right. All right. Is there anyone in this room who has seen a small child and realized that child needed someone to be kind of a protective guide and support person? Please come forward. All right, you go for it, girl. Marvelous, marvelous, marvelous. All right, I'll come down to life. Thank you so much for your fatherly support. Much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Someone else come over here? Oh, all right. All the way down there. My goodness, I love this. We have a lot of fatherly support in this room. Of course we do. We have caring people who have stepped up to the plate. Thank you so much for doing this. All right. So anyone who has seen a middle school kid, a pre-adolescent who is just so lost and needs some guidance, some support, some way to feel who they are in their body and in their world. Anyone? Come on up. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your fatherly support. It counts, Carol. Here, thank you. All right. or a college-age kid who, you got it, okay, who needed a little mentoring, who would not have been able to make it through without a little bit of extra support. All right, wonderful. Thank you for your fatherly support. This is beautiful. Right on. Now, this is all quite apart from actually having fathered a child, isn't it? Any of you actually father a child who haven't been come up yet? No? You haven't come up yet. Are you a father of a child yet? No.
That you know of.
There you go. Any of you take a young man or woman who was in your employ or in a working situation or in a nonprofit situation that you were in and show them the ropes because nobody was showing them the ropes. Come on up. All right, I will need that extra back. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I've run out. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Come on up. Come on up. All right. Now, the rest of us may not have done those specific things, but we've all been part of the community, and what I want to do is, really let us all thank you all so much for being that masculine, fatherly, active support, nurturer, protector. We needed you, and the world is a better place because of you. Thank you very much. Now, as you go back to your seats, I may have enough. I have water bottles. Water bottles for the fatherly support. So if anyone is inclined, they're all different shapes and sizes and colors. I knew you'd go for that one, Don. I knew it. Oh, good. They got blue and purple and green, got and silver and gold. All right, there you go. Good. Water bottles, blue, purple, silver, green, gold. All right. When I got one that's actually bright red. I'll put this by the back door, please. Feel free. It's my way of saying thank you. So with that, let's take just one last little minute, and think of the people who did those things for us. Because there was someone in the world who was doing that for us. And if you want to put their name on the back of that little slip of paper, that'd be great. Oh, there is one more here. Someone left it, so please. Just to be aware that there have been wonderful fatherly presences in our life, and there always will be when we can be open to it. And we give thanks for them, whether they're on the planet now, have passed over to the other side, or are emerging in our hearts. We give thanks, and thank you all.